Hello, welcome again to Sport Unlocked. If you're new to us, hit subscribe or follow and we land in your feeds automatically to hear from Martyn Ziegler from The Times, Tariq Panja from The New York Times and myself, Rob Harris from Sky News. And this episode is focusing on the International Olympic Committee presidential elections. And Tariq, you made it to Lausanne and you had one mission with the candidates.
Yep, finally managed to track down Mr. Watanabe. Long-time pod listeners may be familiar with Mr. Watanabe of Japan, one of the 7 candidates, and his big idea for a 24-hour Olympics. Or is it the pod? Is it your idea, Rob? I asked Mr. Watanabe. Can I ask my friend, Rob, we do a podcast together, and he had this idea of a 24-hour Olympics in 2021. And he's convinced that you might have heard the idea from the pod. When did you first think of the 2020? When did you think of the 24-hour Olympics? Who gave you the idea?
No, nobody. I'm thinking because this is I'm studying. I was in the board member of the 2020 Olympic Games.
Yeah.
It's wow, this is out of the money using.
Yeah.
Is because every time is growing.
Yeah.
And
the cost.
Yeah, cost.
Yeah.
How we can reduce for the cost? Can start for the 5 continents. And 5 continents and looking for the.
So he claims it's his idea.
He did, Rob. I think we're just gonna have to get you two in a room to figure this out now.
So you were there at the IOC this week. It's like curious hustings, wasn't it, for the 7 candidates? You got to ask questions, but none of the IOC members did.
As far as grumblings go in the kind of weird IOC environment, there were a few in that kind of diplomatic way. Each of these candidates, the 7 candidates, they traveled to Lausanne, to the headquarters of the IOC. They got to present to the members that will be voting for them, but they were able to take no questions. There was no conversation. So you have to wonder what it was all about in the end if you can't really interact.
Yeah, it's. I think there was this strange procedure where the IOC members weren't even allowed to bring in mobile phones. It was all done so there was no recording going on.
It all meant the only way of knowing what was said in the room was what largely the candidates had to tell us, because no one around the world could hear any of this process at all. But all credit to Juan Antonio Samaranch Jr. He used his 10-minute slot with the media to say he used his time in the room with the IOC members to talk about us and how they should be engaging with the media.
I told them that exactly, let's refocus our relationship with the media. They are not our enemies. They are our allies. You shape the opinion of the world on the Olympic Games. This I intend, if I become IOC president, to maintain, and you can keep me accountable for that if I am there.
The whole election seems a bit very, very tightly controlled by the administration.
They should want this to be talked about a lot globally. It's about relevance for the IOC, which so many of the candidates are referencing. Yet, this would barely have raised a muster around the world. Perhaps the suggestion about the 24-hour Olympics is something that actually would have created a talking point. It was certainly mentioned around, and Morinari Watanabe's comments have certainly whipped up a bit of interest. We started the week, didn't we, with Prince Faisal of Jordan?
Yeah, we did. We met him in London, and we got an idea of the flavour of the man, Prince Faisal. Rob, he's got an interesting pastime, it turns out.
Yeah, how he relaxes after a busy day. He's a former military man, and he plays the World of Warships game.
He's a gamer.
Well, I have to confess that I wasn't across the world of warships, but I have done some research, and it's a game based on real-life warships from different countries and naval battles. Is this the sort of person we want running international sport? Well, maybe.
Well, there's always a few battles there, but he also talked about his ability to be a diplomat because of his years in the sort of Jordanian leadership, both as royalty and in other positions there. And I guess what is the job of the IOC president? It is to be sort of corralling the world together in some sense. That's the esteem they hold themselves in.
So I think he was trying to show his esports credentials, particularly with the E-Olympics coming up in Saudi Arabia. Also asked about Mideast politics, something that could come up if he is elected. He would be the first non-European, non-North American elected to the IOC. And, we heard from him in that press briefing after the hustings in Lausanne. Also, we heard from Kirsty Coventry, the former Olympic swimming champion, Zimbabwe sports minister, who's trying to become the first female president of the IOC.
She was really kind of stand out for those reasons. Also, she's just had a baby recently. I think a kid is 6 months old, a second child, and one of the questions were, can you manage being such a mother of such a young child and taking this role? And she answered that, I thought, quite well.
Hi. Nadine Sheikh Hassan from Jordan and AIPS Media. Being the only female candidate for presidency and from Africa, how do you plan to leverage that female power, let's say, knowing that you have a baby girl, 6 months old at home also? How do you plan to, let's say, manage that between home and being future president of the IOC?
Thank you for the question. First and foremost, I want to be the best candidate to win, not just because of my gender or from where I come from. And I believe I've got a lot of expertise to bring to this role and to leading the organization. When I was stepping into my ministerial role 7 years ago, I was pregnant with my first baby girl and had to quickly learn how to navigate and be a woman with a career as well as a mum and a wife and everything else. And it can be done. I'm very lucky to come from Africa because culturally we know and we firmly believe that it takes a village to raise a child. So I have incredible support with my husband, with my family, and with the people around me. And I have only ever been successful because of a good team and the strength of that team. And that will continue in this leadership role.
Presumably, if she thought she couldn't handle family commitments, she wouldn't be entering the race. It's a bit of a strange one to me.
Yeah, the one where no man would be asked whose partner had just given birth about how they would cope with the job and parental duties.
Exactly. I thought she handled that really well.
Mr. Coventry would also be the first African to be elected IOC president. She's been focusing some of her campaign about the commercial relationship between the IOC and the top sponsors and about how that interaction continues beyond the games taking place every 2 years. And she does bring that athlete perspective, as some of her rivals do as well, to the campaign. She was, though, questioned about how close she is to the incumbent, Thomas Bach, with the sense being that she's the IOC president's preferred candidate. This is what Kirsty Coventry had to say.
I think President Bach has, you all know his background. And first and foremost, he's extremely loyal to the Charter. We all have a very good relationship with him. And I think he is being very fair to all of us at this point in time.
Look, the other issue that they all raised was, whether privately mainly, was the fact that this issues in camera, in closed doors, the mobile phones were taken. And people were saying, given the speech of my life here, I wish this was recorded. It's a very strange environment. Now, if you were to ask me, leaving the IOC after those speeches, after the 2 days they've had there, is there a clear front runner? It's really hard to tell because the members have also been told, look, you can't really say anything, don't speak. It's a very, very tightly controlled environment, which both members and those bidding to become the IOC president become really frustrated with.
Yeah, just over 100 voters, you're restricted from voting for someone from your own country, but you can vote for yourself. Kirsty Coventry seen as a Thomas Bach favourite as he prepares to leave office. Sebastian Coe, obviously, perhaps the most famous of names as former Olympic champion and world athletics boss. He's perhaps raised the issue that's divided the candidates the most by suggesting prize money for medalists. In fact, athletics introduced it in Paris for gold medalists, and they say silver and bronze will get them prize money too by the time of LA. But he seems to be backtracking a bit.
Well, I don't think he's backtracked, but he has apologised, hasn't he? He said he should have done it in a different way. So he's not backtracking on the actual idea, as far as I can tell, but maybe how he announced it.
Yeah, you don't want to perhaps offend the electorate. Another candidate, Johan Elias. He's a British-Swedish billionaire. He runs the International Ski Federation, although that was another IOC decision this week. They approved them being the International Ski and Snowboard Federation, maybe trying to get a bit more useful there.
Yeah, of all the candidates, I'd say Elias might be struggling the most. I mean, you can't fault him for ambition. He announced his candidacy to be the IOC president just weeks after joining the IOC in September. He hasn't been there that long.
Here's someone with a clear proposal, and that's to decide effectively 4 decades of Olympic hosts on rotation.
The proposed rotation scheme of the Winter Olympics is very important, where we have infrastructure in place to deliver the events. We need to make sure that we find solutions with the IFs to make sure that capex and investment is kept up, so we don't have to recreate what already exists in places where it's natural to go. Now, with the Middle East, with Africa, with India, here it is going to be essential that we are very strong and committed to low carbon impact on anything that we do. And this requires careful planning.
In terms of his profile, if the media conference were anything to go by, it might not be looking good for him. So each of the candidates were given 10 minutes to field questions. Unfortunately for Mr. Elias, there weren't enough questions for him to get to the 10-minute mark. So maybe he's got a bit of work to do.
Somebody should... Did anyone ask about Andrew Inverness, his one-time business associate? Because this was a funny story that came out a couple of weeks ago, that Prince Andrew, the member of the British royal family, is a business associate of Mr. Elias. And apparently he was reported to the police for using the pseudonym Andrew Inverness when he set up a business in 2002. And the pseudonym was Andrew Inverness, yes. So you had an opportunity there to ask him about Mr. Inverness, but nobody did.
Well, I did, though, when I interviewed him a couple of weeks ago.
Very good, Rob.
Yes. And he actually just said, well, it's one of Andrew's titles he was using. He is also the Earl of Inverness, as well as Prince Andrew, the Duke of York as well. Quite a few names, and insisting there was nothing improper. It was actually just meant to be a environmental cause, and certainly defending it, and also defending his friendship with Prince Andrew, saying that he's still friends. He was part of the Pitch at Palace, which was the entrepreneurial scheme Prince Andrew ran, which features in those various films about the infamous interview Andrew gave about his links to the disgraced Jeffrey Epstein. Yeah, it was quite a rarity to hear from one of Prince Andrew's friends on the record, certainly standing by him. He says he's not funding him in any way.
Well, look, guys, if that's the most interesting thing about Johan Elias, I would worry for his candidacy. But I think the IOC members hopefully will be looking at him in the round. So he is a sports executive of some repute. He's running the Ski Federation, and he is also he's been described as a billionaire. Is that right? Sports equipment manufacturer.
Yeah, he's behind Head, and obviously that's one of the key roles of the IOC, isn't it? To keep those finances up, and currently they are at $7.3 billion of revenue secured for the 2025-2028 cycle and $6.2 billion for the 2029 cycle. But some of those big sponsors have left their deals after Paris, so they are in need of generating new income from new sponsors. So that could help him. Another candidate we haven't mentioned from cycling.
Yeah, David Laputien. I was going to say, he's at a really low profile in this election, which is quite strange because he is a fairly high-profile person normally, I think. He's been put in charge of the Olympics, or the Olympics, as I think they should be called. What was his performance appearance like, Tariq?
To be honest with you, I thought he did really well, certainly in terms of the 10 minutes in front of the media. It was quite high energy, quite ambitious.
Dave Laputien did talk about climate change like quite a few of the candidates. He was blaming the fires in LA, the host of the 2028 Games, on climate change. And, it led to questioned, of course, well, if the IOC is trying to do more for the environment, what was the point of everyone gathering in Lausanne when interactions were so restricted and members couldn't even question any of the candidates in person? It could have just been held remotely, this whole session, although, of course, it did benefit the media perhaps more, being able to have that time questioning the candidates. And Tariq, it's a point you raised to the party. And
we're all here in Lausanne. All these members have flown in. You've essentially stood in front of them and made a presentation. They haven't been able to ask you any questions. Given that's the operation, what was the point of everyone flying here if they can't interact with you at all? And how does that fit in with this climate change agenda? Thank you.
So that's a good question, but I was not in charge to design the frame of this candidature. It's in the hands of the Ethics Commission. So the frame for this meeting was to have only a 15 minutes presentation from each candidate. So it was not really us to design this point. But I think also the fact that nearly all the members are on site, it's also because they consider it's important to see the different candidates, but also to see them in configuration, I would say. And for them to feel if the different candidates, they have the capacity to lead the organization.
No kind of revolutionary detail. There's only like, in terms of candidates with really detailed manifestos, you have Sebastian Coe, and these are all on the website, easy to find, Sebastian Coe and Juan Antonio Samaranch. I thought both of those guys have very detailed plans there.
And Seb Coe with some of those proposals that have stirred quite a debate, far from universally embraced, the prize money for Olympic medalists and saying there should be a ban on transgender women in women's sport. Now, there have been all sorts of discussions about transgender eligibility, but Seb Coe taking that clearest position in terms of just what happens to the female category. But, it will be something that challenges all the candidates going forward. Sebastian Coe obviously has great Olympic experience, winner of gold and silver medals at the 1980 and 1984 Olympics, then going on to have his political career and indeed winning the London bid for the 2012 Games. And he was asked about that in the briefing by Duncan Mackay, journalist who's followed him on that path over many years, previously inside the Games, now launched his own Zayas Files online.
2005, you were leading the London campaign. 2015, you were bidding for World Athletics President. Where do you think you are in this campaign compared to those two?
I have no idea. I always smile because Paul Dighton, my hugely talented chief executive through the London years, came to me shortly after I appointed him. And he said, can I ask you a question? And I said, yes, of course you can. And he said, why didn't London get more votes? And I said, well, it's quite a tight competition. We got across the line from an outstanding bid, which was the Paris bid and Madrid in 2005. And he went, no. He said, I don't really understand that because everybody I've spoken to said they voted for London. So I think there is probably, hidden in that is probably the answer. I hope that what I've been able to do is communicate my passion and my commitment and my love for the Olympic movement and the Games and all the things that we know they have the most profound catalytic impacts on.
The one real revolutionary, we talked about him at the top of the pod here, was Morinawi Watanabe. He was the last to speak, and I'm sure he would have left an impression. I'm not sure, it might be a bit early for his ideas to be fully digested by a conservative audience there in a membership. But Rob, this 24-hour Olympics isn't his only zany idea. His other big one, and I hadn't realized, it was only when a Japanese reporter had asked in the press conference about his idea of completely renaming the International Olympic Committee, the 130-year-old organization, quite a strong international brand, as the World Sports Organization.
It's one of the strongest brands in the world, Olympics. I mean, if anything, it's actually underplayed with things like the IOC.
And his view is like, sports is happening all the time, everywhere in the world. The Olympics are just one part of sports. It's going to be under this umbrella. There's going to be the Olympic brand, but on top of it is the World Sports Organization. And maybe we're just not there yet. That scene in Back to the Future, where he's playing rock and roll music, and he says, "Look, you might not be here yet, but your kids are going to love it." So maybe in like 2050, there's going to be all of these plans, and we're going to be thanking the visionary Morinari Watanabe for all of these.
Is this him suggesting getting a footprint on sport all year round, every week? A bit like we hear from FIFA quite a bit, football uniting the world, trying to have more of a say on the game. So it's not just about the Olympics every 2 years, but everything in sport could fall under the IOC with its rebrand.
Yeah, and look, you did say this, and some of the candidates said this as well. Look, this is a great opportunity to get the IOC and the Olympic movement into the news. That's why they're kind of frustrated at these very restrictive rules around this campaign, because it's not getting that much air, it's not getting that much airtime. And if you can get that message out, maybe not so much in the way of completely revolutionary ideas like this, but just to get some ideas percolating, that might be good for the brand.
What can be good for the brand is open bidding contests. It creates all the discussion publicly. It creates the contest around the world about who's in for the games. Although on the flip side, it can lead to allegations of corruption and all that jostling for votes. But it was something that Juan Antonio Samaranch Jr. did bring up. Of course, he's got great Olympic experience in terms of his father being president in the past as well. Knows about the pitfalls of bidding as well. But I think as we look back at particularly how the Olympics were ordered to Brisbane in 2032, it was Qatar who were cut out. This behind-the-scenes deal was done. Sorry, a lot of questions about how the IOC has been conducting this process have been raised. The esports Olympics was given to Saudi Arabia in a 12-year deal. There's no open bidding process on that. Saudi has shown it is a hub of esports and really is interested in developing it, but would other countries have wanted the opportunity to be able to bid for it? Interestingly, this week, Sport Business is saying that it won't be starting from this year, so we wait to know when those E-Olympics will begin. But this is what Juan Antonio Samaranch had to say when he was asked about whether he'd return to a more traditional bidding process, an open bidding process.
I think that we need to produce not a more traditional, but a better, a new, more aligned to the current times model that would include a final decision and a significant participation of all IOC members.
Many of the candidates were being asked about how they deal with Donald Trump, just showing how much of an influence he's going to have on the world in the coming years, far beyond politics, really on sport as well, given the Olympics and the World Cup to come.
Yeah, absolutely. And not just Donald Trump, they quickly pivoted to the unstable world we're in. Obviously, Donald Trump would describe himself as a stable genius, but being in the room with him is going to take some doing. And their answers often was, look, no one wants the 2028 Olympics in Los Angeles to be a failure, not least Donald Trump. So they should be pushing in the same direction, but they've all said they're going to find ways to manage that relationship and others. And I guess proof of the pudding is in the eating, right? When you're in the room with him.
No Donald Trump in the room in Lausanne, but he's certainly going to have a few opinions, I imagine, on the Olympics in the years to come. What would he have made being in Lausanne if he didn't get a chance to ask any of the candidates any questions? That's something we've been talking about throughout the pod. And for a closing thought, here is one of the candidates, Prince Faisal of Jordan, brother of the king, talking about the whole oddity of the process and just how lacking in openness it can seem to the outside world.
If I was the president, I think I would be a little bit more flexible in the rules. At the end of the day, you've got to recognize that we are part of a global community, part of the global sports community. And what we're looking at as being candidates is to become the president of the largest sports movement in the world. And I think in fairness and transparency and integrity, the world has a right to know who is running and what they stand for. So as president of the IOC, I would allow for more flexibility, because at the end of the day, the world should know who its leaders are and should have an opportunity to meet them and understand what they stand for.
Look, I suppose, despite all of the quirkiness, we can say there is an election, a genuine one at that. 7 candidates, 7 different platforms, 7 manifestos, and last week in Lausanne, 7 presentations and press conferences, albeit 10 minutes apiece. That kind of display stands in contrast to what's happening in, say, the football world, where we've just had a parade of uncontested elections and the lack of access to ask difficult questions is getting greater and greater. And I would say, one of the candidates there, Juan Antonio Samaranch Jr., made a point about the importance of talking to the media and getting their story out. But maybe that also is a concern for the IOC. Football is hugely popular and perhaps always will be, whereas the IOC is looking at the future and is concerned about the issue of relevance, something at least for now football doesn't have. So maybe, that's why there is this difference. But, a contested election, that can only be applauded.
It certainly gives us a lot to talk about, doesn't it? Particularly when you've got 7 candidates. We've not had anything like that in the world of FIFA for a long time. And even questions about the IOC process. But good to talk through it all with you on this episode, looking entirely at the International Olympic Committee presidential election. Send us your thoughts at Sport Unlocked on X, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, as well as Blue Sky. You can email us sportunlockedpod@gmail.com. And if you hit subscribe, you'll land in your feeds automatically. Plus, there's a WhatsApp channel too. Follow the link on the pod description. Now, thank you for listening. Goodbye.